A Nefarious Nightmare contains themes that may be explicit or triggering for some. Specific warnings and disclaimers will be mentioned in the show notes. A Nefarious Nightmare assumes all parties that are mentioned in these cases to be innocent unless proven guilty in a court of law. Listener discretion is strongly advised. You can help us grow the show by leaving us a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or you can join our Patreon for lighthearted bonus content. With this, welcome to Season 5.
I'm Amanda Cronin.
And I'm Courtney Fenner, and this is A Nefarious Nightmare.
Please take a moment to go to truecrimepodcastfestival.com and use the code BEES, B-E-E-S, at checkout for a discount on your tickets. We will be there August 25th through 27th. It's in Austin, Texas, and it's going to be so much fun. Ahead of our Still Minding the Beehive series, we want to do a bonus episode because there's still space between today and next week, which we don't want to leave you all hanging before Season 5 officially drops. But we have been teetering on when the appropriate time was for Courtney to finally speak out about her experience as a survivor. Something happened recently, and some other things have been occurring in the background for over a year now, and she decided it was finally time. Before we get into it, I want to give you all some statistics real fast on cults. From the article, The Psychology of the Cult Experience by the New York Times, Dr. Margaret D. Singer estimates that there are 2,500 to 3,000 cults in the United States, with dozens of small cults, too many to keep track of. The number of cult members nationally is variously estimated at 300,000 to 3 million. These numbers may range in your mind to large or small, but think about how many people live in the United States. The population as of 2021 is roughly 331.9 million, which means that roughly 0.9% of the US have been in a cult. Still doesn't sound like a lot. If you're a podcaster and follow Listen Note scores, you'd know that if someone is in the 0.9%, they are probably at the top of so many podcasters. But then you find out that there are tons of podcasters at that same 0.9%. So, while the number seems rare, it still seems like a lot. And it's still a good likelihood that just about anyone can fall victim to a cult. When looking at statistics of sexual assault and cults, you pull up so many articles. A few examples are sexual abuse of children in cults, a clinical perspective, researchers reveal patterns of sexual abuse in religious settings, sexual abuse in charismatic cults. The list goes on. You can Google it and numerous articles come up. Sadly, the results we see are that children in the cult settings are most at risk for being sexually abused, with women being a close second. This is because those who hold rank on anyone in a cult do indeed follow a pattern of grandiosity, gaslighting, power hunger, God complex, and the quote-unquote, I can't do no wrong mentality. The typical traits of a narcissist, which most, if not all, cult leaders are. Finally, it's commonly perceived that those who fall victim to cults are undereducated, poor, they lack resources, are religious, low self-esteem, and that the majority is women, at 70% of potential recruits. While some of this may be true, we also know that not all cults operate in the exact same way. Courtney describes her experience as being in a pseudo-cult, where the leader pulled from many cults before them, such as drinking the Flavor Aid, which thankfully wasn't poisoned in her case, branding, and said it was like David Koresh met Charles Manson and Jim Jones spawned babies, and they started Cult 2.0, the new class. It was diet cult. They didn't kill anyone to our knowledge, but they sure did use a lot of the same tactics that former used, such as love bombing, creating an us versus them mindset, punishment circles, meetings, public humiliation, self-incrimination, brainwashing, paranoia, separation from the quote-unquote outside world, and sexual assault or harassment. We typically don't talk about cults in this podcast because while we do feel like it is a crime and that it does victimize and take advantage of people, it doesn't always fit into what we typically talk about, which is crimes deemed against those especially vulnerable and usually pertaining to some element of sexual assault. However, we do know and are finding out that cults and sexual assault are often interlaced, and Courtney's story is not an exception here. For the sake of safety, following statutes, and just for the general awareness, names and other identifying information will be withheld. Pseudonyms will be given, and if anyone has been in this situation, please feel free to reach out to us. Please know that although identifying information is being withheld, that this is a factual event that had occurred, and please be sensitive and empathetic because this can and does happen to anyone. As you all know, Courtney is one of my best friends, and she just really embodies strength and resilience in every aspect of her life. She is a true survivor, conquering challenges that have come her way with unwavering determination. Her spirit and courage inspire me every day, whether facing personal hardships or supporting others in their own battles. Courtney's strength shines through. Her resolve and survivor spirit make her a remarkable individual and one of my most cherished friends. At this point, I'm going to pass the floor to Courtney, and I encourage you all to listen with empathy because this has been a struggle for her to talk about. But we feel like it's important because she's alluded to this so much in the past, wanting everyone to know that she sees everyone and understands what it's like to be victimized. And while we have offered our platform to many victims, survivors, and their family members, we want this to be a safe space for her too. So with that, here's Courtney.
So, y'all likely know who I am by now, but my name is Courtney Fenner. I'm a musician at heart. I love jewel tone colors like your plums and your emerald. I'm a workhorse, and I have severe anxiety, depression, and ADHD. In fact, I've recently adopted the term neurospicy, which I guess means neurodivergent, and that's fine. My mom passed away in February, but before she passed away, we actually had a discussion about how we both believed that I may actually be on the spectrum, but was misdiagnosed as a kid with ADHD. You know, they didn't know much about autism back in like the 80s and early 90s, but I do believe much of my mental health issues are due to whatever I have, whether it's ADHD or spectrum disorder. But, you know, due to those things, I've always had trouble maintaining friendships and relationships because, you know, people see me as overly sensitive or overly brash. You know, I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm kind of a people pleaser. And I come off aggressive sometimes, but I can assure anyone that I have a big heart, that I care deeply about people. And I always feel like I have to explain myself thoroughly because people love to take me the wrong way. And it sucks because even when I explain myself thoroughly, people still take me the wrong way. I'm a mom and a wife first and foremost, and, you know, work life is always second. I have a beautiful, funny, super intelligent, and rambunctious little kid. She's 5 years old, and I'm remembering when I found out I was pregnant with her, I ceased any vice that I had. I just knew she was going to be a girl. Everyone told me I was having a boy. Even the dreams that I had said, boy, it's a boy. Like I dreamt that I was having a little boy. But even with those dreams, even with everybody around me telling me it's a boy, I just knew she was going to be a girl, you know? And I had 2 losses prior to her. And I was told after that it would be a miracle if I had ever successfully conceived a child. My daughter is definitely my rainbow child, and I fought so hard to make sure that my pregnancy with her, remained viable. We even had a threatened miscarriage with her when I was 13 weeks, which scared me so fucking bad because even to this day, I'm a bit traumatized by my miscarriages. I had one miscarriage when I was 21, which was back in 2004. I was about 9 weeks pregnant, and I had no idea I was pregnant. And my second miscarriage was around, 27 or 28, while I was in the cult that we're going to be talking about. And I didn't know I was pregnant either time until the OBGYN I had seen had said that they were surprised I never came in for a DNC. Oh yeah, by the way, I was in a cult, from April 2006 to December 26, 2010. I've had a pretty, most of the time I want to say a shitty life, but I prefer to tell people I've had a weird life because, while we definitely grew up on hard times and with very little, and, I'm underestimating it at this point because it's not relevant, but, we did have a lot of good times as well. I remember there were times where, like, the stepdad that my mom was with at the time knew that I loved Korn and Nine Inch Nails and all this other stuff, so in order to, bribe me to like him, he'd gotten me a Nine Inch Nails shirt and this like ball chain type of necklace that were popular back in the early to mid 90s and early 2000s. All the stuff that the goth and the skater kids would wear. He would take me to like vintage record stores. Both of the stepdads that I had would do this, and they would take me to vintage record stores to get like the rare CDs of bands that I really liked, But, I also experienced and witnessed in some cases a ton of abuse. We had financial setbacks, meaning like we were nearly homeless several times. I've had to deal with racist family members. I have seen and dealt with sexual misconduct. We've been neglected in our past, and I was bullied quite a bit growing up. In fact, I've seen my share of fat phobia. My favorite nicknames from the mean kids are as follows. It's Earthquake, Boom Boom, and Crisco, which, if y'all don't know what Crisco is, it's a can of lard used for frying things. But hearing from even well-meaning people, even to this day, that I would never get anywhere in life unless I lost weight. Sometimes I'll still get DMs of certain diet fads or recipes to, quote unquote, help me slim and be full. And half of the time, I know people mean well, but it is hurtful because they don't understand and they refuse to understand that my fertility issues and my PCOS actually plays a major role in my weight loss issues. Of course, I deal with a little bit of disordered eating at times. I binge eat, but most of this is just hormones. And regardless of everything, I try to keep body positive, and it's just not always easy, but I try so hard. We live in a society where sometimes it's acceptable to be fat, and sometimes people want to judge you for it, so it's just, I don't know. I think that some of this is why I have a hard time dealing with people demanding things of me or giving me unwarranted advice. I don't know, but I guess I'm just putting it out there that those are some of my pet peeves. Like when people demand me to do things or when they're like, oh, you should do this. And I'm like, well, I didn't ask you. Also, I don't like people who can't be honest. I prefer to know if people have an issue with me so we can just go ahead and squash it right then like adults rather than find out the latest gossip about myself, the latest news or whatever from others. And I really don't like injustice. Like, be fair, if you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. If I promote you, do me a favor and promote me back. It's not rocket science. And, if someone does something nice for you, fucking thank them. Good Lord, because doing something nice for you is something they did because they didn't have to. It's because they wanted to, They took the extra effort and time out of their day to do that. Least you could do is say thank you. Even if you don't like the thing that they created for you, just say thank you. It's not hard. It costs $0 to be kind. Back in 2005, I had experienced a massive heartbreak. I had been in my longest relationship at that point, and he just kind of up and left me. There's no hard feelings with him now. I mean, we're even friends now. But at the time, I was kind of out of my element, and I'm just seeking attention and love from just about anywhere I could. I was also getting deep into my own music, which, when you're heartbroken, you can write some serious bangers. And, I started a group with a friend, and we played a few shows, joined a very small label, and then left the same label after I decided to move from Dallas, which was where I'm born and raised, to Tulsa, Oklahoma. And it was in Tulsa where I spent much of my time feeling pretty alone, because I believed my move to Tulsa would be a fresh step. I jumped out of the fire and into the flame, as it were, because I ended up fucking hating Tulsa. And toward the end of my living there, I traveled with some friends to a city outside of the DFW Metroplex, but in Texas, to play a small backyard show. And it was a small backyard show, but we were just playing any show that would allow us to play. We wanted to get our visibility out there. We wanted to be like, look, this is a chick that can rap, So we did our set and met this group of people who seemed super amazed by it, right? I remember being a little drunk, and an older woman, and for the sake of privacy, we're going to call her Susan, came up to me and said that if I ever wanted to move back to the Metroplex, that I'd have a home. And as if to prove a point, my ride back to Tulsa abandoned me, and I ended up taking a Greyhound back. And, a few weeks later, I had to quit the job I had in Tulsa and hitched a ride back to the Metroplex and moved into this 2-bedroom apartment that about 30 people already lived in. Yeah, definitely 2-bedroom, 30 people. Think about it. It was very cramped. Everything seemed to be going really good. I had developed a crush on one of the people, and we're going to call him Chris. And I'm not going to lie, we had quite a bit of sexual experience between us, but it never went anywhere. I was still very heartbroken by the person who had dumped me, but I was seeking that same love in anyone I met, so I held out hope for us to be together. I was ready to just jump from one relationship to another at this point. Like, I did not like being single, And it sounds silly, but I really just wanted to be loved. I felt so alone, like nobody else would accept me. And I just missed being in a relationship so bad, but I also wanted to be steadfast in hiding that. All my life, I've wanted to be the wife with 1 million kids and the soccer mom and basically break every cycle that I grew up with. But I also wanted to make damn sure that nobody knew that about me, because I wanted to put on this tough facade. But, of course, I grew up since then, as evidenced by the fact that I'm married now to my soulmate and have my beautiful child. But, life. So after I moved in, I was hanging out with them pretty often. I felt a little out of my element, but I'd never felt so welcome in my life at the same time. Here I am in a group of people that we all share the same common, goals, and we all liked the same kind of music, and, we all even practice the same kind of magic, as it were. So one day I was sitting outside having a cigarette, when Chris and another dude, we'll call him Brandon, they walked up and started doing this weird, I'm embarrassed for them secondhand to this day, but it was like this ritualistic type of dance around me. They were just circling me, doing this weird, they were just acting fucking goofy. And, I was just sitting there smoking a cigarette, just kind of giving them this, what look. And they're doing this weird dance, and they would kind of speak, as an audio engineer, imagine panning your tracks. There's one in one ear and one in the other, and that's just how it was. So one kept saying things like, "Have you heard about the jesters?" And the other one would say things like, "You want to complete the circle," and just weird shit that made no sense, right? And at that point, I thought it was weird, and I don't know. I was just okay, what are we, 12? But it didn't really affect me in the way of this is a red flag, I need to run. It was just more these people are weird, whatever. Looking back, that was definitely kind of a red flag, because as you're about to hear, it all kind of ends up making sense. But I just felt like I was being hazed, I guess, and they were failing at it horribly. But it was pretty much more of a turnoff than anything. But I was also still desperate to be in this relationship, so I said something like, "This is dumb, but what are these burns and necklaces that y'all are all sporting about? Because I'm seeing them everywhere." And then they'd both laugh as if it was some secret inside joke, and they'd walk off. So it's like, haha, the joke's on you. I'm not going to tell you, but you're going to see it everywhere. Haha. Anything to try to get you interested, right? And of course, it worked. As dumb as it was, it worked. Because I have a curious side to me, and I like to research stuff, as evidenced by the fact that I do a podcast, So I really wanted to know. So I ended up starting to ask everybody questions, and it turns out that they were fishing me in. So I went to the leader, and we're going to call him Charlie. And by the way, Susan, I mentioned her earlier. Susan was his mother. And then there's also this leader's sister, and we're going to call her Heather. So I went to the three of them, and I asked them about it, and it took a few minutes. But the only person that really explained anything to me was first Susan, and then Heather would kind of go off of her. And basically, I felt like I was being recruited into a job or something. You don't realize that you want to work at this job until you start talking to the managers or whatever. That's what it kind of felt like. But it only took a few minutes, but I was recruited into phase 1 of 3 phases of what would become this family circle. I was told phase 2, and I'm calling them phases. That's not the real terms for it, but it's just generalized. But I was told that phase 2, that usually happens within 3 to 5 months. So once you're in phase 1, for example, you get moved up to phase 2 after 3 to 5 months. And then if you're good, you get moved to phase 3. So they say that each phase happens within 3 to 5 months. Phase 3, where you would be fully indoctrinated into what I didn't realize at the time was a cult. So, however, as much as they wanted to say that it took 3 to 5 months, it took a week for me to be fully indoctrinated. And that same night, I received my brand. And when I say brand, I mean I still have a burn scar on my hand from this. And yes, we all were branded, except for Heather, because Heather was too good to be branded, evidently. So things were going well until a couple months went by, and Susan and Heather had decided that I was old news. The first incident that I can recall, we went on a trip to JCPenney, and I'd noticed Heather was stuffing her stroller with a bunch of clothes, makeup, perfume, and Susan would complain and say how wrong this was and how ashamed she was of Heather, but then would turn around and stuff that same stroller with stuff that she wanted. So several others that were with us would join in and tell me to grab some stuff, and I was one of the only ones that had said no, because I am the kind of person that will get caught. If I'm doing anything wrong, I'm like a deer in the headlights. I can't hide it. I have a guilty look on my face all the time, and I'm the first person people will look at. So I'm like, nah, I'm good, right? I'm not gonna steal a bunch of merchandise from JCPenney. Thank you for inviting me to do that, but I'm respectfully declining. When we returned home that day, they unloaded all of this stolen merchandise and showed it off. It's laid out all over the bed, and they're like, Courtney doesn't get any of this because she's too much of a fucking pussy. And I didn't want any of that stuff anyway, but they sure let people know how much of a pussy they thought I was. So Charlie was dating his girlfriend at the time, and we're gonna call her Lisa. Lisa at the time was both my favorite person and also my least favorite person. She always had a huge heart and was always there for you, but then would turn around and always wanted to fist fight somebody. She was always drinking, and she was always like, I'm ready to box. She was always ready to, break somebody's face open, very violent. But I think that she had been through so much trauma in her life that that's just the way she reacted to things. But she always wanted to fist fight. And then she had found out that I had a minor crush on Charlie at one point for a very little while. And to this day, I cannot even tell you why, except that I was fully manipulated and brainwashed and love bombed by him, because that dude was not, he was not cute, okay? And there was always tension between us from that. But one day we had some kind of event outdoors, and part of the event was that we all had to put on boxing gloves and fight each other. I can't tell you why, but that's what we had to do. The thing is, when I am truly angry, there's really no stopping me. But usually, I'm definitely non-confrontational, and I avoid fighting whenever possible. I like to try to just smooth things over and just be, grown about things. I like to avoid any unnecessary drama. I just don't like it. Never have. Lisa knew this about me and felt like this was a weak spot, right? And she knew that I didn't want to do this little circle fight thing. So she said that she was going to go easy on me. We would just make it quick. We move on. No big deal. So as soon as everyone circled around us, I put my gloves on, she put her gloves on, and then I panicked because I somehow just felt it in my gut that this would not be the case. And before we could start, she clocked me right in the face. She knocked one of my front teeth loose, and I had a bloody nose. And I walked away from it, and I heard somebody say that I handled that like a champ, but then I wasn't in earshot, and they thought I wasn't, but they said, "Courtney's such a fucking pussy." Oh my God. That shit's fucking hurtful to this day, I don't like to think of myself as a pussy. Like, I don't see that, but okay. I began dating someone that was about 6 years younger than me at the time. I was 25, and at the time, once we started dating, I just started to realize that I wasn't that into him. And we're gonna call him Jeff. So at this point, Jeff became fully indoctrinated. And I remember being told that if any of us develop a relationship and then break up, that it would go to the second punishment phase, and that the person doing the breaking up would be in a circle where everyone had their turn at beating you up. And I had seen this happen firsthand with somebody. The person ended up in the ER like near dead. So I was scared to break up. Despite the fact that I was not happy, I was terrified to break up. So the whole time I was trying to get him to break up with me. He just never got the hint. So one day, I was lying in bed watching some movie, and he came in and he laid next to me. And I was disgusted because he'd removed his shoes and he was not exactly hygienic. Like, his feet stunk, right? At the same time, though, I was trying to overlook that, and my hormones definitely got the best of me because I was very all about my libido at that time. So we got kind of steamy and we proceeded to have sex. Things were fine until he had entered me through the backside. And I began sobbing and begging him to stop. And he wouldn't stop. I kept begging him to stop. I was saying things like, "Please stop. It hurts." And, he wouldn't stop. This went on for a good solid couple of minutes. And he just would not stop. It hurt, And I begged him. And then finally I got a ton of strength and just shoved him off of me and said, "Fucking stop. It hurts." And so he began to cry, and he said that he felt so bad and that he didn't mean to, and he was just in the moment and didn't hear me tell him to stop. And I believed him. I hugged him and I said, "It's fine. I believe you. You didn't mean to. It's okay. I just need some time because I'm still kind of in shock." Because anytime you are being pummeled in the back and they won't stop, you're gonna be in shock. But I left it at that. Got over it fairly quickly. The next day, I heard several of the males, they were outside smoking cigarettes and they were laughing, including Jeff. So I went out there and I'm just smiling and I'm like, "What's so funny? What's everyone laughing about?" And they were all, "Oh, you're a girl. You wouldn't get it. You wouldn't understand," or, "Don't worry about it." And I'm feeling really insecure at this point, and I'm starting to get in my head, and I thought, what are they talking about? Like, what? I want to know what they're talking about. Are they talking about me? Because at that point, everyone kept calling me a pussy over and over again, and just making fun of me. Like, this was happening almost weekly at the least. So finally, it gets to a point where Brandon's there, and I'm alone with him, and I'm like, "Hey, can you tell me what y'all were talking about? Because I'm starting to get a little bit, in my head about this." And he said, quote, Jeff was telling us about how he butt fucked you and you cried about it, and then proceeded to make fun of me by saying in a mocking tone, stop, it hurts, and laughing. And I was in shock, and even to this day, I still don't even know if I should define it as rape or not, but it sure felt like it. I mean, even to this day, I blame myself because I didn't want to get in trouble for breaking up with him, but I didn't want to be with him. But I wanted sex at first, and it was so complicated that I was forced to lead him on and give in to my own wants, which I feel led to this incident. So I don't even know, you know? In a way, I feel bad for Jeff because he had gotten an inheritance from a family member of his who had passed away, and that entire inheritance was spent in 1 week. Some by him, but most of it by Heather, Susan, and Charlie. And yes, this is a common factor. Like, I wasn't allowed to have a job much of the time, but when I did have a job, I had to hide a portion of my earnings from them in order to be able to survive. You know, there were times I wasn't allowed to touch any food in the house that was bought on my dime, so I'd have to sneak food in for myself. If I didn't have a job, I'd donate plasma to get some kind of money, and all that money went to them too. I'd save like $5, you know, every time so that I could just get what I needed. And I figured out later that several people did this. You know, some would steal from Walmart or a gas station or something to have food, which I never did because guess what? I'm a pussy, right? No, I was just too paranoid. I knew I would get caught, so I just decided to just save $5 here and there. But you know, I couldn't blame them for doing that since, you know, none of us ever had money. You know, any money that we had earned from anything went straight to Heather, Charlie, and Susan. But, you know, the people who were always caught saving the money were always hazed, shunned, humiliated, you know, whatever. And they never confirmed if I was doing it or not, but they did often try to guilt trip me into admitting it and then assumed I was anyway, you know, so I just can't win, you know. But, you know, I never got in trouble because they never confirmed it. This entire time, you know, we all did music. Susan had decided that we were going to branch off and start our own little record label. I was forced by Susan to earn my keep, even though I was already doing enough of that at that time, you know, to be on the computer the entire fucking time. And by the way, if I wasn't performing shows, I was literally on that computer for 4 years, okay? I credit all of my audio know-how and graphics and networking to this, just to this 4-year incident, right? But just know everything I've learned, everything I've self-taught came from a traumatic experience. You know, I had to create graphics, make instrumentals and beats, reach out to promoters, draft emails, write songs, ghostwrite, do vocal coaching, and I was never to leave the computer without asking. We even found a way to distribute CDs with our music, and I'll tell you all, I've never seen one fucking dime off of anything that was monetized. Not one. Any song that I wrote, any CD I sold, anything I created, all of the money went to Susan, Charlie, and Heather's pockets. And with a computer, even when I asked to leave, it was always a problem. I rarely slept. There were times I would snooze on the couch, you know, next to the computer, so that way I could just get to the computer real quick. But, you know, when I was caught, like, dozing off or whatever, Susan would just kind of walk up and snap at me to wake up. I had stuff I needed to do. I was also somehow supposed to double time and clean the house while I sat at the computer. You know, my current and permanent anal retention on a clean house so that I don't have to deal with it later on. I credit that to having to clean up after 30 to 40 people at all times in a small house. So I'd been called lazy and worthless several times at this point, you know, despite doing literally everything for these people. We'd moved to several houses and apartments in the span of this entire time, and we'd been promised to have our own private room if Jeff would give Susan half of his inheritance that he had gotten. But then after we moved, we found out that we were going to be sleeping in the front dining room area where there were no walls, only a staircase, where anyone walking up or down could see in that area. And it just reminds me, I had a dream about that area just recently. I remember, you know, in the dream, I was in that area that we had lived in, and I remember thinking, am I really back at this place, you know, and feeling so freaked out. And I remember being there and looking around to make sure that nobody that lived in that house was around. I mean, when I tell y'all I have nightmares to this day about this experience, I have them to this day. You know, I recently had a nightmare where I was in this group hanging out with everybody, and they were all forgiving me for escaping, but they were all, you know, calling me worthless and pussy and all this other shit. So Lisa came to me one day at the computer and she said, "Hey, family's going out to play touch football. You definitely should come." And I was like, you know, Susan's not going to allow me to do that. And Lisa said, "Charlie's in charge, so you have to." And so I did. And I mean, I did have a little fun, but all I wanted to do really was sleep. I mean, I even to this day appreciate so much the intent by Lisa to take me out of what became obvious to them, which was I was being forced to do for Susan all the time. But really, all I wanted was to sleep, you know? Anytime I would sleep longer than like 4 hours, you know, Heather or Susan would pipe in and say things like, "There she is sleeping again," making me feel shitty for doing what you're supposed to do as a human being, you know? Or when I would eat food even, and it wasn't just me, it was anybody. We always got, "Well, there she is eating food," as if I'm not supposed to have food, as if I'm not supposed to like survive. I would go to the bathroom for 5 minutes. "Well, there she is, she's just leaving the project. She's just leaving us behind. She's just so disloyal." It just was horrible, you know? But yeah, I appreciate her to this day for that, but all I wanted was to sleep. But, when I came back in, I remember that Susan had raged on me so much about how I never do anything. I never do anything right. I never do anything for her. And then how I'm this huge disappointment to everyone, and my loyalty to them had come to question, you know. And I figured that Lisa and Charlie would come in and back me up, because I saw them walking in and seeing all the yelling and seeing what was going on. But instead, Charlie had piped up and said, "Yeah, Mom's right. You're definitely slacking." So in order to earn their respect back, I made a huge effort to make this graphic for Charlie's particular music group. They were trying to drop some kind of CD. I spent about 27 hours at the computer on just that alone. And, you know, he gave me a vision, told me what he wanted, and, I created. And I was so fucking proud of that. I was so proud of it, and it came out really good. I mean, I'm to this day impressed by it. I don't know what it looks like anymore, because at the end of all this, I deleted it because I was so hurt. But, I showed it to Susan. She was really thrilled, and then she went into Charlie's room. She woke him up, and I'd been going off of no sleep for 27 hours. She went in there and she woke him up and had him come look at it. You know, he did. He stared at it for like a minute, and then he blew up and he said, "This is all fucking wrong. God damn it. When will you fucking do anything right?" He'd walk off and back up the stairs and saying things like, "Fat, dumb fucking hoe never does anything right." This is the kind of shit I'm hearing for 4 years, y'all. And it really gets to me to this day. I can't, hold on. So, a few weeks after that incident, I had been given permission to get a job, right? I found a coffee house nearby, and I'd interviewed for it and gotten the job. You know, I had a lot of experience being a barista in the past, and I was really fucking stoked about this. I love making coffee. I love coffee. So, before I started, I wanted to go visit my mom, my stepdad, and my sister, because they were planning on some kind of family get-together. Probably like 4th of July or something, I don't know, but it was around July. And, you know, so they were planning this, and I was like, man, I really miss them so fucking much. I want to go. So I gathered some courage, and I asked Susan if she needed me to do anything, because I really wanted to visit my family before I started working. And needless to say, I wasn't allowed to visit them. I wasn't allowed to go. Susan laid on this guilt trip and told me that they are my family now, not my mom and my stepdad and my sister, that they are my family, and that it doesn't look good for me to spend time with outsiders, and this could become a phase 2 punishable offense, that I'd get a new brand over my current one, and it would mark me to be beaten up at any given moment, that I'd be outcasted from this family. As I've said before, I've seen this punishment happen before, and I was terrified. So I just said, okay, I won't go then, right? And I pretended it didn't affect me. The next day, it was still July 2010, and I'd posted on Facebook about how I was excited to get this job and that I was heavy anyway, so I'll just, walk it off and work and take advantage of the heat and the cardio. I was trying to be positive. My mom had commented saying something like, she didn't want me to pass out from heat stroke and to try to find a ride if I could. And I responded with, hey, it's all right, I'll walk. It's no big deal, right? And I truly did. Like, even to this day, I love walking and listening to music. It's a good escape. And back then I had acquired this cheap little MP3 player, and I liked being alone with my music. I loved listening to Tech Nine. I loved listening to whatever I could listen to. But Susan, Heather, and Charlie all had taken this whole exchange as a wrong way and called me in their room and began questioning me extensively, all because my mom didn't want me to die of a heat stroke. They accused me of making them look bad, said I called them horrible people, which I'd never said anything to anyone to that point. And just accused me of all kinds of shit, stuff that they would invent. And then they went on and told me that they weren't going to let me walk to work and drove me there. I was upset because I genuinely wanted to walk and just get away. I wanted some time alone. And also, it doesn't feel good to be accused of things you aren't doing, So the night I got home, I unsuccessfully tried to unalive myself because I'd had it at this point. I started cutting myself again. I tried so many other different methods, but something just kept holding me back, So that night I said, God, I'm in a cult. If you exist, please take me out of this cult or I will kill myself. And I literally thought that was the only way out, was to die. So the next day, I was able to walk to work. So I had my headphones and started to walk. And this song by Tech Nine, it's called Need More Angels, and I strongly recommend everybody go look at it, right? That comes on randomly. And just the very words that he used in that song, there were particular key elements and key words that he was using that just spoke to my exact situation. Right down to the lingo that he was using. It was almost as if he was telling my story. It was so weird. But that came on and it just spoke to me. And it spoke to my spirit. And I ended up in the middle of the street on my knees in 105-degree heat, sobbing my eyes out, feeling some hope for the first time in 4 years. And I felt like for once God had heard me. So from July until December, I started taking little bits of my stuff and dressing in layers to, hide my stuff in a janitor closet at work. Made sure my plans to my parents via a fake email I created. Made sure I told them about it, but while I was at my coffee shop, because I found out a little bit later that these people had access to my email somehow. Like, they knew my passwords to my MySpace, my emails, and my Facebook. They'd been reading my messages and deleting friend requests. They knew that my stepdad was onto them, but I had no idea. Like, I didn't know. There was an email that he had sent me. He was expressing concern, saying something like, I think you're being manipulated and taken advantage of. And I never saw the message. They had to tell me about it. I was like, wow, that's wild. These same people were also, this is weird. They were accusing me of having an affair with my stepdad. I don't know where the fuck that came from, but this is just how deep they were into my, personal life. I would never, ever have considered him as anybody that I would have gotten with. There is no, I'm very monogamous as it is. I would never, stray. If I'm in a relationship, I'm in a relationship with that person, but much less my stepdad. But they were constantly just doing everything they can to make me feel ashamed of myself because my stepdad was concerned about me. But I never saw this message. I was just told about it. They told Susan about it, and I advised my stepdad after I found out about that to just start messaging me at certain email addresses, and that I would only read them and respond from my job. I was that paranoid and I was that careful. So we had a big show coming up in October, and it would be the last show that I ever played. And I was the only person who knew that because I'd been planning to leave. So I went ahead and just gave my best performance. The show was meant to unite all musicians because there was a lot of like beef and drama going on in that genre that we were in, and they were just trying to unite everybody for once. But since so many people in this cult that I was in had issues with everyone, we played our sets, and then immediately after the set, they went and beat the absolute shit out of this girl that I didn't exactly care for at the time, but I never justified this level of violence on her. I remember mending bridges with somebody from the label I left 4 years prior when Susan runs up to me panicked and she goes, "Courtney, we have to go now." So as we're rushing off, she was explaining to me what had happened, and she told me over and over how incredible it was that I wasn't involved. And I didn't really know what was going on at first. I thought that she was telling me that somebody died, and then I thought she was telling me that they killed somebody, and I was freaking out. I was like, what? And then I found out later that several of the girls that I was part of this group with went and beat this girl up to the point where she had to go to the ER, and she went into a coma. Like, they beat her up that bad. I remember I was kind of given a script of things to say if a police officer were to ever question me, and fortunately nobody ever did. But I do know that since that event, I had reached out to that girl and made peace with her on my own accord and assured her that I was not part of that. And she knew that I wasn't part of it, but she did name off all of the people that were. So yeah, that was not a fun thing that happened. I just realized that night when that happened that I knew that I had enough, but at that moment I was just done. Any apprehension I had about escaping flew right out the window. Of course, the minute Susan was in everyone's presence, it went from her being thankful I wasn't involved and saying that I was the responsible one to her calling me a pussy for not fighting. Go figure. So there was a situation where I had slept with this person, and it was back before I met these people. He wasn't in the group, but he had formed an alliance with all of us at this time, and I'd been under the impression for a little while that his relationship was open, so we kind of had some flirty moments for a while, and then I got with Jeff, and he got mad. Like, he was angry with me for getting into a relationship, right? And then I found out that he definitely was not in an open relationship, but he was cheating on her with me. I didn't know, but I started rejecting his advances, and also, as I said, he found out I was in a relationship with Jeff, and he got mad. So anyway, this person decided that after the fight that he wanted to call the ethics of this cult I was in into question, which was kind of a relief for me at first, but I still had to remain hush. So then Heather comes to me and explained everything she knew about me and this person, and said that since she knew I had slept with him while he was in a relationship, that I had two choices: either tell his girlfriend about our past or end up in the hospital like the girl they beat up. So I told her. The next day, I got a message from the dude basically threatening to kill me if he sees me in his neck of the woods. And to this day, I do watch my back because he is crazy and I just don't know what he's capable of. But at the same time, I wouldn't tell this story if I felt like there was a legitimate threat. So I'm being careful. Anyways, December of 2010 rolls around. The plan was originally to leave January 1st and never come back since the coffee shop was closed that day. But my depression and anxiety were at an all-time high. I'd spent all of my money buying Christmas presents for all of the kids that were in this cult. And when I expressed to somebody how I wished I had kids of my own to buy Christmas presents for, one of the members, whose son I bought presents for, by the way, lamented about how all I do is cry and complain and how my depression is annoying and I'm just attention seeking. And I never really talked much to him. All I had said was that I wanted my own kids. He then said, of course, he was like, "Man, they're right. You are a pussy. Quit acting like a fucking pussy and you won't feel this way." And I had it at that point. I was really tired of hearing fucking pussy every 5 minutes. Like, that was their favorite go-to word. Like, even after I left this thing, like, I got messages of them saying, "You're a fucking pussy." I'm like, God, can y'all not come up with a different insult? Like, good Lord. So December 25th comes around and everyone opens their presents, and it's one of those rare times where everyone's happy. And I felt confused by that because here I was at the end of my rope, but I found myself in wondering if I would miss them. Like, and I knew I would. I even to this day miss some of them because some of them had good points about them, right? But at that time I was like, what about my music? You know, are they wrong? Or am I wrong? Am I really taking this too personal? Am I really such a lazy pussy? Am I really attention seeking? Or am I legitimately a victim in this? So I called a friend of mine who had already planned to take me to Dallas on January 1st and just told her everything. She reassured me by saying that that I wasn't imagining things, that I was indeed in a cult. She had been in my shoes before, and then she said, I'm taking you to Dallas tomorrow, not January 1st, tomorrow. So tomorrow comes, and it's December 26th. I was due to be at work at 8 a.m., so I grabbed my stuff, acted like I was leaving for work, got in her car, flipped the house off, stopped off at work, grabbed my stuff in a hurry because I was afraid that somebody might have seen me and tried to follow me. Fortunately, nobody did. But stopped into the janitor closet and got some of my stuff and left. And nobody knew I had left for like a week. That was what was weird. Like, they were constantly watching me, but they didn't know I was gone for a week. They just assumed I found out that I'd left to visit my family for Christmas. And then they got a call from my job at the time wondering where I was. And here's what's really fucked up. The coffee shop even worked with them and gave them the last phone number I called them from. I had already told them that I was in a situation of abuse, and the coffee shop gave the information to the cult, right? Like, helped them try to find me. It was bizarre. Heather even tried to call my stepdad, and she pretended that she was the bank I had an account with at the time to try to get money out of there from me. Like, I had no money in there, so they weren't gonna get anything anyway. But yeah, like, it was just wild. So for a full year, I got random phone calls and messages harassing me and my family. Anytime I'd go to the area that they were all in for any reason, I was made to put a scarf over my head and disguise myself. Like, we really felt my life was in danger because of all of these threats and the harassment that I was getting. One person reached out to me and said that they were proud of me for leaving. And, you know, we talked and, you know, made our amends or whatever for like an hour, only for them to report everything I had said back. And I mean, I had a weird feeling about that conversation. So I did hold back, you know, pertinent information from them. But, you know, I wasn't shy about calling people out on their behavior. And I found myself remembering over and over again when one of the cult members' kids came forward and said that Brandon was molesting him. I kind of always have my regrets about that because back then I was terrified. You know, Brandon held a higher rank than I did. He was dumb as fuck, but he held a higher rank, you know. And I also didn't know then what I know now, that like when a child speaks out about any kind of sexual misconduct, 99% of the time they're telling you the truth. I didn't know that then. I was one of the many who thought this kid was a troublemaker who acted out and was probably just making accusations for the sake of making accusations. But now, looking back, it fucking bugs me to no end because I see it differently. You know, he was acting out because he was treated so poorly and he was neglected by his parents, and it's a sad reality that he very likely was molested. The cult has since disbanded to my knowledge. I'm still in touch with a few people who did escape after I did. I feel like there's no threat to my safety at this point, but just to be sure, yes, I've changed names and other identifying information. I don't know what happened to the dude who threatened to kill me, but from what I understand, he's always been all bark and no bite, so I'm not too worried about it. But if they're all listening and that worried about what I'm saying, I didn't name drop, so if they do name drop themselves, that's fine because that reflects poorly on them, not me, you know? To this day, it never ceases to amaze me the lack of compassion and empathy people have for each other. I've been very shy to tell my story because, you know, when I've alluded to it with so-called ethical creators in the past, they in one breath would claim to be empathetic to victims and survivors, but then make fun of cult survivors or cult situations. You know, these things that happen to us, whether it's surviving a cult or being raped or murder, it's the worst times of our lives. And if you're out there claiming ethics and advocacy, then I want to know, I want you to know, talk is cheap. There are, unfortunately, many of these people who claim these things who will turn around and do the very things they speak out against. And I know none of us are perfect. I've made my share of mistakes, but we all have, right? But I want everyone to know that I mean it when I say I'm not competing. This isn't a pissing contest. I literally survived something, and I'm fucking just fed up with having to explain myself all the time. And if people judge me and don't believe me, that's on them, but I know this happened, and after dealing with so many fucking naysayers and backstabbers in this overly saturated true crime space, I felt the need to finally come out and tell everyone, hey, I was in a cult, and I've learned a ton from it, both good and bad. And honestly, I've become a better person from my experience, not because of them, but because of me and the few people who supported me. And what saddens me is that the people who need to hear this are the most likely not gonna listen because I guess they're jealous or something. I don't know, but if that's the case, it's fucking ridiculous. Did you know that a lot of the things that Amanda and I get are simply from asking? But anyway, I guess I'm saying, quit judging people for their neurodivergency or their neurospiciness. Quit assuming things about people, especially after hearing their story. Most of all, if you're going to talk about it like ethics and advocacy, be about it too, because at the end of the day, what's done in the dark, I've always found in my own experience, always comes to light. And to Susan, Charlie, and Heather, as well as their sympathizers, y'all some goofy ass individuals who fare poorly against everyone else. You lie, you manipulate, you take advantage of kind people, and proceed to call everyone you come across a pussy. Like, come on. You love to be two-faced, but then talk shit about people who are two-faced, right? You're a fucking hypocrite. One of you is dead, and I'm glad. Period. Y'all are even two-faced with each other. Y'all are the fakest people I've ever met. And I find it funny how everyone is a wuss or a pussy, but none of y'all will ever physically fight your own battles. You have others do it for you. I find it hilarious how some of you never graduated from high school mentality, and y'all are stuck in high school in continuous drama, and worst of all, children have grown up and been raised in this nonsense, so you are not only victimizing them as well, but you're also causing them Stockholm. I just hope to God that you're listening and you know how much pain and trauma that you've caused me, as well as many others, because they all have come to me and said something. But what you haven't done is broken me. So thank you for forcing me to learn and self-teach myself on how to be an audio engineer and graphic designer. Thank you for causing me so much pain and trauma to the point where I have no choice but to be empathetic for the others similar to me. And thank you for silencing me for 4 years, because now I'm loud as fuck about it all. I may still have nightmares about my experience and I may have never healed, but I use these tools now to educate others. So thank you and fuck you.
Please take a look at our show notes and visit the sources that we have used for this episode. A few books that we recommend are Brave by Rose McGowan, I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. Although that book is not about a cult, there are several points in there that are very relatable. Troublemaker by Leah Remini, and Road to Jonestown by Jeff Gwynne. And podcasts that we want to give a little love to and for all of you to listen to are as follows. Was I in a Cult? A Little Bit Culty. Narcissist Apocalypse. This is Actually Happening. What Was That Like? And the one that Courtney dedicates this to is the podcast Something Was Wrong with Tiffany Reese, her latest season, where she tells her story. That was a huge motivating factor in this episode happening. Thank you so much for listening, and as always, remember, bees are strong, resilient, and yet vulnerable. We need bees to continue to build our world and keep the planet going, so we must protect the bees at all costs. Without bees, we are doomed. So be vigilant, for when you mess with the bees, you get the hive.
Thank you for listening to A Nefarious Nightmare. Music used in the theme was originally by Ghost Stories Incorporated, remixed by Ryan RCX Murphy. Additional background music is provided by Epidemic Sound. A Nefarious Nightmare is scripted, researched, and produced by Courtney Fenner and Amanda Cronin. This podcast is a Cloud 10 podcast, managed by Sim Sarna, Sahiba Krieger, and Jamie Rice of Murderish and Dirty Money Moves. I'm Lainey Hobbs, and as always, be vigilant, for when you mess with the bees, you get the hive.